When I was in my 20s, working really hard towards my goal. My goal was always to have a resort in a paradise island like Bali. And it had been taking me much longer than I thought it would take me to be able to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I was in Singapore one day working really, really hard on my business. And I came home, and as I was coming home, my head was just full of all these business things. And there was this noise, this crying happening on the street. And there was this like commotion in front of my house. And it turns out that it was my wife Renata, who was really upset because there was a tow truck out in front of the house. And they had come to tow away our car because I'd forgotten to pay, well, it'd been quite a few months that I'd forgotten to pay the payments. And the reason had been that I was so wrapped up in trying to make my business successful that I didn't want to look at the bills and the fact that I was like, in debt and all these other things that so many of us struggle with. But when I saw her and her reaction, and I was there pleading with the guys, like, please, like, can you just, like, give me extra time? And he, of course, he wasn't a negotiator. He was like, nope, I'm taking your car, call this number. And I remember that moment, she walked back in the house because she was obviously very upset that the car was gone. And the tow truck went. Our neighbors had come out, so that was also part of the embarrassment. And I was just standing there on my own. And it's really interesting because we all hear stories about how you got to pay yourself first, you got to look after, but these are all kind of like just words. It's when you go through an experience which is at such a level where it really impacts you, like, what am I doing? Why is it that I am so focused at trying to get to success that in itself has led to failure? What I did at that point was I applied certain things that I'd learned from a mentor several years earlier. Because I'd gone out to look for mentors. I just hadn't necessarily listened to everything they had said. And there was a mentor who had met me several years earlier when I was in another of my businesses. In fact, it was the same publishing business that I started straight out of university. And at that point, I was like running like crazy. And I remember going to see him. He was the first millionaire I'd ever met. I didn't know millionaires. And when I went to see him, I had all these questions I want to ask about my business. And he said to me, Roger, before I answer any of that, how's your personal finances? I said, what's that going to do with anything? I'm here to talk about the business. He says, it's everything to do with everything. How's your personal finances? I says, well, what do you want to know? He says, well, how much money do you put aside each month into your portfolio? And I laughed. I was like, well, I don't have a portfolio. It's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not an investor. I don't do that kind of thing. He says, are you negative? And I said, yeah, sure I am. But I know lots of people are negative. It's like, I don't need to pay myself now. I make the business successful, and then later on I'll get paid. And he says to me, if you're not willing to invest in yourself, I'm not willing to invest in you either. And he got up, ready to go. And I remember at that point, I was like, wait, what have I said? Have I missed something here? And when he came back, he went through this whole process with me of saying, look, just get in the habit of just treating yourself better than that. Because this is all about your own self-worth. This is about you deflecting everything out there where only if someone pays you the money, you're going to take it, but otherwise you're not worthy enough for it. And I didn't really, at that point, really get connected to that idea, because frankly, when you're at infrared level, which is the bottom level you can be at, not only are you in a place of true lack and stress, you're actually also in a place of denial. And you don't want to be hearing that. And I didn't want to hear that either. So I'm like, I'm not sure if I even believe this. But what he did was he showed me how if I just put a little bit of money aside, and I remember we went through the exercise, it was very funny. We went through this exercise where he says, look, I just put some money aside and then come back and we can speak. I said, okay, what do you want me to do? And he says, just put $100 a month aside. And I said, into what? Like stocks and property? No, just in another account, just put it aside. I said, well, I could do that tomorrow because I'll just pay myself a bit more from the business, right? And he goes, yeah, well, that's what I want you to do then. And I'm going, okay, then what? And he says, well, then when you come back, I want you to then double it. And I said, well, I could do that next month. I could do it straight away. He says, I don't want you to do it straight away. I want you to take it one step at a time so you get in the habit of doing it. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm like 2 months in and now I've doubled it. That's easy. Now what? He goes, well, just double it again. I said, what, to $400? And he goes, yeah. Just keep on doing that. We'll talk about what you're going to do with that money later, but just get in the habit of you paying yourself in a way that allows you to experience what it's like to have more money, personally, not in your business. So I said, okay, all right. And I said, this is going to take a long time to get wealthy or to have the ability to go out and make a difference in the world or any of those things. And he says, well, just work out how many times you're going to need to do this. So we did. We kind of put it on a list, and it only actually takes 10 times the doubling before you're over 100,000 a month. And at that point, you're obviously making over $1 million a year before you've sold a business or before you've invested in it properly. It's just cash flow that's coming out. And I remember I was sitting with him and I was like, well, I can tell you, I totally get to the 100 and the 200, But this like going from like 1 month 25,000 to 50,000 or 50 to 100,000, that's like that, I just do not see that at all. He says, let me tell you, as you start going through this process of delivering more value to the world and having more flow coming through you, you'll find it's actually easier the further you go. And it is, even though at the beginning you can't see how it can be easier. Just like if you're in a car, it's easier to go from 100 miles an hour to 120 miles an hour when you're on a racetrack than it is kind of like just getting the car started and doing your first 20 miles an hour. And so I said to him, well, I still don't believe that. He goes, then let's just change the time frame. Forget about it being like 10 months. What about 10 years? And I remember at the time I was like 24, and I was thinking 10 years, I'm gonna be 34 years old. Like, that's so old. I was like, well, I'd be very disappointed if I wasn't doing that in 10 years' time. So he says, okay, so now all we're doing is arguing about timing. So you decide. And what happened was, I never applied that. But when I was standing there and my car had been towed away, and I saw myself revolving around this business like I was going dizzy, and my wonderful wife was that little moon that was kind of like supporting me, but like was getting even dizzier. And I just changed it all. I put the family right in the middle, like that was the sun now. Everything's gonna revolve around us, and we were gonna be the ones that could really make a difference in the world. And then I put the 100 aside, and then I put the 200 aside, and I actually made it 3 months, not 1 month. Within 2.5 years, I was making over $1 million a year. And the way I did it, I had no idea that's how I would end up doing it. But every 3 months, I was looking for a different way to be able to find the next step up. And so I ended up with partnerships. I ended up in different industries. I went from publishing into events because each one was allowing me to take the next step. And there's a huge difference when you wake up every day, and you know when you wake up, you've got an extra 3,000 or 5,000 in the bank than you had the day before. If you think differently about what you can do, you start contributing more to things that actually you really care about. And you then look at your business very differently, because if it needs resources, you've got it. But more importantly, you then also attract other people that also are generating that kind of flow that then can support your business as well. So there's a strategy and there's a structure which allows us to really change the true way that we are and allow us to be able to move forward. For me, it started with a really difficult moment when I had to confront who I was and just get truly real about whether I was serious about really making it while I'm on this planet or not. And from that decision, then it was following through on strategies that I already knew, I just hadn't been applying.